Section 1.2 is a continuation of what we have already learned in Section 1.1. Here's an example. You will be given a bar in compound time, and you need to choose a correctly rewritten bar in simple time. The question may also be asked in reverse. For example, they may give you a bar in simple time, and you have to choose a correctly rewritten bar in compound time. In order to answer this question, we have to learn about what compound time and simple time are all about. Simple time and compound time in music represent two different kinds of understanding of time. Let's start with the idea of 2. When we count in 2, what we are actually doing is counting in duple time. There are two kinds, simple duple and compound duple. In the case of simple duple time, we always have the number 2 at the top of the time signature. The bottom number doesn't really matter, as it only represents the kind of beats unit. In this example, we have a 2/4, so we have 2 crotchets. And when we subdivide the beats, we always divide them by 2. So in this case, each of the crotchets divides into 2 quavers. Whereas in compound duple, we always have the number 6 at the top. Again, the bottom number doesn't really matter, as it only represents the kind of beat units. And in this example of a 6/8 time signature, we have the basic units of 2 dotted crotchets. When we subdivide them, however, we now subdivide them by 3, unlike in the simple duple where we subdivide by 2. So in effect, it becomes 1n and 2n n. So in total, there are 6 quavers here. On to the idea of 3. When we count in 3, we are counting in triple time. Again, there are simple and compound versions of it. In the case of a simple triple, we always have the number 3 at the top of the time signature. The bottom number doesn't really matter, again, for the same reasons. And in this case, we have a 3/4 as an example, which means there are 3 crotchets in every bar. When we subdivide them, again, we subdivide them evenly. So it becomes 1n, 2n, 3n. They divide into quavers in this case. In comparison, when we have a compound triple, we have the number 9 on top of the time signature. Again, the bottom number doesn't really matter. In this case of a 9/8 then, we have 3 dotted crotchets, and they divide by 3. So they become 1n and 2n and 3n n. Lastly, on the idea of 4. When we count in 4, we are doing a quadruple time. Again, there are simple quadruple and compound quadruple times. In our simple quadruple here, we have a 4/4 time, which means 4 crotchets per bar, or we can also divide them into quavers, into 8 quavers in total, so that becomes 1n, 2n, 3n, 4n. And then for the compound quadruple, we always have the number 12 on top, and the bottom number doesn't matter. And in this case of a 12/8 here, we have 4 dotted crotchets in every bar. When we divide them, again as with any compound time, we divide them by 3. So in effect, it becomes 1n and 2n and 3n and 4n n, a total of 12 quavers, therefore a 12/8. In summary, we have 3 kinds of time: duple, triple, and quadruple. And each of these times, we have a simple and compound version of it. What matters really are the top numbers. In simple duple, we always have a 2 at the top. In compound duple, we always have a 6. Simple triple, we have a 3. Compound triple, we have a 9. Simple quadruple, we have a 4. And compound quadruple, we have a 12. And the main logic behind them is all about how we subdivide the beats. In simple time, we always divide the beats evenly by 2. whereas in compound time we always divide the beats by 3. One thing I often point out to my students is the difference between a 6/8 and a 3/4. Now, if we look at the subdivision of beats between these two times, they both share exactly the same number of quavers. In compound duple, we have 6 quavers in total, and in simple triple, we also have 6 quavers in total. And so what's the difference between them? Well, the difference is exactly the way how they are grouped or divided. In 6/8, we divide these 6 quavers into 2 groups of 3, whereas in simple triple, we divide them into 3 groups of 2, and that is the difference between a compound and simple time, even if they may share the exact number of beats when subdivided. Now that we have learned about simple time and compound time, let's come back to the question. We're given a bar in compound time, and we need to choose one of the following bars that correctly rewrites the time into simple time. In this example, we have a 12/8 and 4/4. And if you remember from our previous slide, 12/8 and 4/4, they are both quadruple time, because we always count these kind of times in 4, and it's just a matter of the subdivision that is different. So the first thing we should do in the 12/8 bar is to figure out where the 4 groups are. And because it's 12/8, a compound quadruple time, we will then be looking for groups of 3. In this case, 3 quavers. Now the first group of 3 can be found in the first beams group. If you do a little bit of maths, after factoring in the dotted note and the semi-quaver in the middle, you should be able to get that there are 3 quavers in total. And the following 2 notes form another group of 3 quavers in total. And the third group is self-explanatory because there are 3 quavers. And the last group is the dotted crotchets there, which divides into 3 quavers as well. So here we have the 4 groups of 3 quavers. Now, in order to play all these notes in the time of 4/4, we need to use one rhythmic device, and that is something that we have already talked about, the triplets, because the idea of triplet squeezes everything into the time of 2. So in this case, we squeeze 3 in the time of 2. Effectively, if we are to squeeze all these 4 groups of 3 into the time of 4/4, we have to add a triplet sign to each of these group of 3. And this is how we do it. So the first group of 3, we simply add a 3 sign above it, as are the 2 groups that follow. As for the last note, because there's only one note, we don't have to add the triplet sign. However, because we're working in 4/4, this means we have to turn this into a single beat unit in the time of 4/4, which is also to say we have to convert it from the dotted crotchet into a crotchet, because the crotchet is the basic beat unit in 4/4, just like a dotted crotchet is the basic beat unit in 12/8. And so the correct answer is the last option. Now let's look at another version of the same question. This time we're given a bar in simple time first, and then we are asked to choose one of the following bars which correctly rewrites the bar in compound time. In order to do this question, again we should figure out whether we are working with duple time, triple time, or quadruple time in the first place. And because it's a 3 on top, we can be quite sure that it's a triple time that we are working with, and that does correctly correspond to the 9/8 that we are trying to convert to. And then we should be figuring out how are the 3 groups of crotchets in this case are divided in the 3/4 time, and how do they correspond to the 9/8. The first group is a crotchet that is relatively straightforward, and in the case of a 9/8, this first beat corresponds to a dotted crotchet there. And we'll skip the second group for now and focus on the triplet group at the end of this bar. If you remember, the triplet is the idea of fitting 3 into 2. Now, if we want to unfit the 3 out of the 2, then what we have to do is to just simply take away the triplet sign and let the 3 notes be 3 notes. That means when we rewrite the rhythm here from 3/4 to 9/8, all we have to do is to simply take away the triplet sign. Now onto the middle group here, the second group. What we need to do then is to make use of the duplet sign, because we're trying to play 2 notes in a space that is normally occupied by 3 notes, and this is how we do it. We simply add a duplet sign over the entire second group here, and this gives us the answer, which is the last option. If you're looking for some more practice, I'll highly recommend that you visit this interactive site where I've put together a lot of practice tests and mock papers with instant feedback. In the drill mode, you'll have access to all the questions section by section, so that you can focus on specific question types and practice them until you feel confident. There are virtually unlimited questions. In the exam mode, you have access to full papers in the exact format of the exam, with randomized questions each time. You have 2 hours to finish the complete paper, at the end of which you'll be given your score and feedback.